Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Almost Major, where we talk about many major studios and the films they release. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Charlie Nash.
Hello.
And Bryden Doyle.
Hello.
And joining us, a super special guest, is Michelle O'Connell. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing just fine.
Hell yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of the show.
We're a big fan of you.
Aw.
I mean, if we're talking about Nick Nolte, I mean, it has to be you.
Of course.
That being said, we are talking about Affliction from 1997. This premiered at Venice in August 1997, released in Canada on December 18th, 1998, opened limited in the US on December 30th, 1998, before expanding on February 19th, 1999. It opened in 3 theaters and maxed out at 335 theaters, a budget of $6 million. Opening weekend, it made $63,000, an overall gross of $6.3 million. Top 5 films that weekend, I'm going off of the December 30th, 1998 weekend, is Patch Adams, Stepmom, You've Got Mail, The Prince of Egypt, and A Bug's Life.
Oh, boy.
That got better as it went on. Those first two are fucking brutal. Jesus.
Yeah, Patch Adams is a monstrosity. Prince of Egypt is one of the most underappreciated animated films of the 90s, and I know that it made a ton of money, but I feel like it doesn't have the long-lasting appreciation from many people, apart from people who grew up with it, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Maybe I'm wrong
Meanwhile,
about that.
a movie so grossly sentimental that even my mom rejected it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Wow. I remember my mom being afraid to take me because I was raised by agnostic parents, and I did not know what was happening in the opening scene, and I was like, you know, totally floored by the music as a kid, but I was like, what's happening? My mom was like, they're killing the firstborn Hebrews. And I was just like, what? And my mom kind of went, this is exactly why I didn't want to take you. And I was like, just so upset immediately as that film began. But then it became, I mean, I got the 4K of it in Best Buy the other week, did not even knowing it existed, where I was just like, well, I can't not walk away with this. I mean, it's like,
I forgot Stepmom opened like that, too.
oh God, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about Prince of Egypt.
Well, I've never seen it, so I mean, maybe it opens.
I've
like
never
that.
seen Stepmom.
Who's to
Thanks
say
for
I'm
spoiling
lying?
2 movies.
Who's to say I'm
Jesus
lying?
Christ.
Yeah.
God damn
Stepmom,
it.
is that a Chris Columbus joint?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Oh, that makes sense.
I haven't seen it. I will see it, unfortunately, but I do know that when it came out, the VHS, you could buy the VHS, and packaged on the back of it was a box of Kleenexes.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a picture of it. I'll send it to you later. But yeah, like Prince of Egypt not having the same staying power as A Bug's Life, which is like the follow-up to Toy Story, and it's just like fine. I rewatched it for the first time in like 20 years, and I was like, yeah,
Is this
fine. Yeah.
is this the first mention of A Bug's Life on the show? Because I know Ants has come up multiple times.
Yes.
Yes, but not A Bug's Life. Yeah.
All right.
Wait, the true successor, not the. I can't tell you who did Ants besides DreamWorks, but
I mean, I liked A Bug's Life as a kid. I owned it on DVD and watched it, you know, a handful of times. But the most seminal memory I have from seeing that in the theater is the Star Wars Episode 1 trailer was behind it. Like,
sure, yeah.
which, you know, when you're 8, you know, kind of blows your mind. And then, of course, I saw it when I was 9 years old in the theater, and it blew my mind. And, you know, can't fully separate myself from that experience of seeing it multiple times in the theater as someone who hadn't reached their double digits in life yet. So, you know.
Wasn't the Star Wars Episode 1 trailer also in front of Meet Joe Black, which is why
Yes.
like Meet Joe Black did so well when its first
Yes,
people were just wanting to
yeah.
see that trailer.
Yep. Dan Mecca's favorite, Meet Joe Black. Yes, everybody flocked just to see a trailer. That is. Imagine if that was the thing now. Did like, I don't know, what would be some innocuous movie that they were just like, Avengers Endgame, the first trailer is going to be before that. Like if it was fucking, I don't know, that movie Focus with Will Smith. If it just like ran before that, and like the first week of Focus is like $78 million and the second week is like $3 million.
It plays before 80 for Brady.
That'd be pretty good. Number one song in the U.S. this week is "I'm Your Angel" by R. Kelly and Celine Dion. Moving on, number one song in Canada this week is "Thank You" by Alanis Morissette. I think Canada had the right idea. Morissette she's Canadian, so that makes sense. This movie, Affliction, won one Oscar for James Coburn and was nominated for Best Actor for Nick Nolte. And plot description from Google, which is always funny. In a small New Hampshire town, a washed-up cop, no judgment, Wade Whitehouse, played by Nick Nolte, has a troubled past, an abusive father, played by James Coburn, the contempt of his ex-wife, Mary Beth Hurt, and an unimpressive streak as a lawman. When hunting guide Jack, played by Jim True, reports a businessman's accidental death during a hunting trip, Wade believes he has a chance to turn around his life if he can prove it was murder. Increasingly obsessed, Wade begins to lose his composure during the investigation. As far as plot descriptions from Google go, that's pretty good. It's not as bad as Cabin Fever, where it just pretends that somebody else is the lead character. Directed by Paul Schrader. Prior to this, Blue Collar in 78, American Gigolo in 80, Mishima in 1985, Light Sleeper in 92. After this, Autofocus in 2002, First Reform in 2017, Card Counter in 2021, and Master Gardener is out right now.
If I may say, I do love that you skip from like autofocus straight to First Reform, because it is truly like a big.
What should I have said? What, Dog Eat Dog, Dominion? What?
Well,
do you want?
That's just the funny thing coming of age as a cinephile. Like when I did, where like it's like Paul Schrader. It was like in the early 2010s, it was kind of like, what's this guy's deal? He can't get control over his movies. They're not really doing well. And then First Reform is like the first one in a long time where people are like, holy shit, this is actually good. Like, and I don't know. It's just very interesting to see.
Obviously, there are fans of the Canyons, but
sure, yeah. Like you do get like small like cults like around some of those movies, and like there's like some of these movies I've heard are like, you know, well, not perfect or like of note and everything. Like The Walker sounds like an interesting one, but it's like it's like the first time in a long time, like First Reformed is like the first time in a long time that one of his movies had like a widespread critical appreciation.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. No, I remember when The Canyons came out, and it's one of the few. It's definitely out of the ones I've seen about 12 Paul Schrader films. That's definitely my least favorite. Most of my problems have to do with Bret Easton Ellis' script. Lindsay Lohan Innocent, I think she is far and away the best part of that movie, but I do remember the whole zeitgeist or the whole commentary being, is Paul Schrader's time up? And then it is kind of really nice to see when First Reform came out, because Dog Eat Dog also got a very negative, pretty muted reception, and then First Reform comes out, and people are not only saying it's a masterpiece, which I completely agree with, but it is arguably one of his best movies, which is always nice to see, especially with, you know, someone who talks about this old fart, he's, you know, why is he even bother? And then it's like, you know, this movie clearly connected with everybody. I mean, not everybody, but a majority of film-loving, people.
Well, it's funny
like,
because I've seen him in interviews that are like, he says like directors get worse when they age, and it's just like his last two movies, I haven't seen Master Gardener, but like his last two movies are like in my top 4, so I don't believe him.
it's also just wild to me that, you know, I mean, pointing to the Oscars is as a barometer of anything is stupid, but it is wild to me that Schrader did not individually get an Oscar nomination until First Reform. Nothing for like Taxi Driver and Affliction and a couple of other things were up for stuff, but nothing for him, which is just wild to me.
That's insane. Yeah, and to be fair, like his screenplay for First Reformed is incredible. I mean, that's such a meticulously crafted piece of writing. And yeah, Ethan Hawke didn't even get nominated, which is also bonkers. Am I the only one who's seen Master Gardener here?
I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
No, not yet.
I will not say anything else other than upon first viewing, I wanted to like it more, and it bums me out as a Schrader fan, but I know a lot of people are very moved by it, so I am certainly willing to give it a second look.
What was I fucking gonna say? Oh yeah, I think his next movie he's actually reuniting with Richard Gere, right?
Yeah, it's called Oh Canada. It's another adaptation of a Russell Banks novel. It's called I think the novel is Foregone, and it has to do with a man who I believe he dodged the Vietnam draft and went over, and he's a Canadian filmmaker, and he's doing some sort of a confessional thing. And was it our friend Mitchell who did an interview with him where he said that he wanted De Niro and De Niro wasn't available, or I don't know if I read that elsewhere, but yeah, he's going with Gere. I personally, I read that description having not read Foregone, I'm like, you sure you can't bring Nick Nolte back? You sure? Like, because he literally like part of his whole life is he got in trouble for selling like fake draft cards during the Vietnam War, and that's why he that kind of put some of his initial life off track.
Holy shit! I did not know that.
Yeah, I looked it up because Nolte talks about it in the documentary Nick Nolte No Exit, and he feels burnt up about not being able to go to Vietnam, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not to get into the politics of all that, but it's like the sentence he was initially given for like the ID thing was like 45 years and like thousands of dollars fine, and I'm like, holy shit! Like, I mean, maybe don't sell fake IDs, but 45 years is crazy. And then it was like he was let off just you can't be in the military, like that thing. And it's Anyways,
yeah, it's
weird.
mentioned, if I recall, as part of the plot in North Dallas 40. It's incorporated, but it's been a little while since I've seen that.
Right.
Huh, interesting. Well, speaking of Russell Banks, this is based on the book by Russell Banks and was adapted for the screen by Paul Schrader. Russell Banks also did Sweet Hereafter. He's just a big fan of snow, so I'm assuming O Canada is going to be set in the snow also. He's just a big fan of snow. Starring Nick Nolte as Wade Whitehouse. Prior to this, Heartbeat in 1980 with Sissy Spacek. 48 Hours in 1982, Cape Fear and the Prince of Tides in 1991, which he was nominated for, Blue Chips in 1994. After this, Hulk in 2003, Warrior in 2011, which he was nominated for. I definitely remember seeing that on my birthday, and I was not crying, so don't tell me I was crying. Gangster Squad in 2013, and saw that in theaters as well. Michelle, as our resident Nick Nolte encyclopedia, what are some gems from Nolte that you'd recommend?
So one of the ones that I'm really high on that doesn't get mentioned enough, and I think it's currently on Tubi, is Who'll Stop the Rain. It's a very early film in his career where he plays a merchant marine and Vietnam veteran who gets caught up in a heroin deal gone wrong with his friend Michael Moriarty and the friend's wife, played by Tuesday Weld. It's got a great ensemble cast. Really just kind of a great death of the hippie dream movie based on a terrific book called Dog Soldiers by, I think Robert Stone is his name. And then I also am a big fan of Martin Scorsese's segment of New York Stories, Life Lessons, which is one of the best portrayals of a toxic relationship between an artist and someone he is basically using as a muse rather than fostering as an artist the way he's claimed he's going to. So one of my favorite things Scorsese ever did, and one of my favorite things Nolte ever did. So those are two that I think sometimes get a little overlooked if you don't know to look for them.
Awesome. Yeah. Who'll Stop the Rain? That is, like you said, currently on Tubi, so I'm definitely going to check that out. And New York Stories, that's actually the only thing, at least narrative-wise, from Scorsese that I haven't seen, so I need to get on that.
It's unfortunately attached to a pretty mediocre Woody Allen short, and one of my unfortunately least favorite things Coppola did, but it is the opening segment and the longest one. It's like 45 minutes, so go see it.
God damn.
Also, Steve Buscemi's in it.
Oh, shit. Without getting into too much depth, do you think that Ang Lee cast Nick Nolte in the role he has in Hulk based on his performance here in Affliction?
I mean, I can get into at least some of the stuff that I think has marked Nolte's career, but I definitely think that his gift for playing deeply flawed fathers is definitely tied into it.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah. Also, Sissy Spacek as Margie Fogg. Prior to this, all Oscar-nominated performances. Carrie, 1976, won Best Actress for Coal Miner's Daughter in 1980, Missing in 1982, The River in 1984, and Crimes of the Heart in 1986. After this, A Straight Story in 1999, and The Bedroom 2001, also nominated. The Ring 2 in 2005, and The Old Man and the Gun in 2018.
I always forget that she's in The Ring too.
I forgot it too.
She has like one scene. I hope she got a very nice paycheck from that movie. It's not good.
I think the first thing I remember seeing her in was Hot Rod, where she's Andy Samberg's mom, and
That's right.
which is pretty funny. And she gets always like, "Your dad didn't die as a stuntman; he choked on a piece of pie." I just remember that.
I think the first thing I saw her in was probably Carrie. I'm also just going to quickly note the first thing I saw Nolte in. I'm pretty sure if it wasn't an early cable viewing of Cape Fear. It was the long forgotten, terrible Julia Roberts, Nick Nolte rom-com I Love Trouble.
I Love Trouble is
It
the
has,
Nancy Myers one. Yeah.
It's one of the greatest acting challenges of his career. He and Julia Roberts just sweatily pretending not to hate each other.
I need to check that out. That's a Nancy Myers Charles Shire movie that I haven't seen. But yeah, I've always heard that it's just not very good. And lastly, James Coburn as Glenn Whitehouse, parts of this The Great Escape and Charade in 1963, Duck You Sucker in 1971, Hudson Hawk in 1991, shout out to Dan Mecca, The Player in 1992, also with Nick Nolte. After this, Monsters Inc. in 2001, and Who Are We When We Remembered That They Just Lied to Us in the Advertising, These Dogs Do Not Talk through the entire movie, and Snow Dogs 2002. Also starring Holmes Osborne, he's fantastic in this, Mary Beth Hurt, and Willem Dafoe. Trivia. When meeting with James Coburn, who came out of retirement for this movie, to discuss the film, director Paul Schrader encouraged Coburn to make heavy preparations for this role. Coburn responded, "Oh, you mean you want me to really act? I can do that. I haven't often been asked to, but I can." James Coburn part was first turned down by Paul Newman and then by James Garner. Both turned it down because they felt it would be very tiring to play such a dark, awful character. Both characters were friends of Coburn, and Garner suggested him for the part. James Coburn based the alcoholic side of his character on Sam Peckinpah, who he worked with numerous times. That's fun. According to Schrader, it was Spacek's husband, Jack Fisk, who came up with the idea of having the characters of Wade and Glenn Whitehouse lick salt off their hands to show how similar they are. Don't understand that. Don't want to know. According to Paul Schrader as well, he came across a paperback copy of the novel in a bookstore and bought it after he was quote-unquote grabbed by its first sentence. After he finished reading the book, Schrader bought the film rights from Russell Banks. After finishing the script, it took more than 4 years for Schrader to finance the film. And of course, we can't end the trivia without talking about some top-tier, bottom-of-the-barrel IMDb trivia. When the family reunites with Sally Whitehouse's funeral, Willem Dafoe's character is asked by his sister if he's a serious Christian, which he denies. Dafoe played Jesus in The Last Temptation of Christ 9 years before.
That's incredible.
Which Schrader is credited on the screenplay. I think that was largely rewritten, though.
Just like,
but this was not they've collaborated so much. Why is that trivia?
Just like somebody's just watching it and be like, Christian, oh, you played Jesus. Oh, this is a revelation. I gotta put this on IMDb.
Or like what I said in our group chat, it's like, you were talking about how cold the movie is, and I was like, yeah, they even got a guy named Jim True Frost to be in the movie.
Oh God.
Oh brother.
It would be funny if like that actor is like, you can only be in movies that are set in the winter, nothing else.
Oh come on, I want to be in Sahara. No.
Wasn't he Fez on The Wire?
He was, yes.
Yes,
he was Prez,
that's right.
which I've only seen like the first few episodes of, but he's very, very good in what I've seen of that. Yeah.
Brian, I don't know if you know this, The Wire's kind of good. I would continue watching.
Oh shit!
That sucker shot himself.
Who, Jack?
Well, the other guy.
I figured you'd know what really happened.
30-30 at close range.
Will it make it?
DOA.
From Paul Schrader, the writer of Raging Bull and Taxi Driver.
I think there's some dirty business going on in this town.
Director of American Gigolo and Light Sleeper.
What are you doing, playing cop? He's a lot like me when I was his age.
You wouldn't have done anything like that. Shoot somebody.
And the acclaimed novel by Russell Banks.
But at least I was never afflicted by that man's violence.
That's what you think.
Comes an emotional story of love, of pain.
I'm free of you. You're not on my back anymore. You see how easy it is, Jack? You think you're getting away with it?
And of self-discovery.
You know, I get to feeling like a whipped dog some days. Some night I'm gonna bite back, I swear.
Academy Award nominee Nick Nolte.
You need me. Even Pop, for Pete's sake, he needs me. This town needs me.
Academy Award winner Sissy Spacek.
What in the world is happening to you?
Film legend James Coburn.
You finally done it. Right, done it like a man done it.
And Academy Award nominee Willem Dafoe. Affliction.
That's all the trivia I have. So initial thoughts. Is this anybody's first time watching this?
Mine.
Okay, I'd never seen this prior either. So, Bryden, first initial thoughts on Affliction.
Sure. Yeah, I remember first hearing about this just as like a fun little bit of trivia. I'm remembering in Ebert's 4-star movie book, which is like his collection of 4-star movie reviews, which is in alphabetical order. I think this is the first movie that is in the book, actually. And we were reading about it and thinking, this sounds really good. I'm probably not allowed to see it, but because I was like 14 at the time. But so like obviously this is like a deeply unpleasant movie. But I think like and sort of like Sweet Hereafter, which is also like a very very bleak movie. But there is, I don't know if I found this movie's milieu comforting and everything, because it is very cold, as you said, but like there are these moments in the movie where like you do get like I think it's because both that movie and both Sweet Hereafter and Affliction like do like a really good job of like creating like a sense of place and community, and like the sense that like this is a place where everyone has known each other for like the longest time. I mean, there's not a lot of happy scenes in the movie, but like the chemistry, I think, especially between Nolte and Spacek, is like so. Like the way that like he just like curls up on the bed and like just sort of like falls into her like her cuddle and everything, and it's like such a relaxed, you know, body language between them and everything, where like you do, and like they talk about how like their characters have known each other since elementary school, and like but like you almost don't need that, because it is like you just get the sense that these are people who are very comfortable with each other, and that's what makes, of course, where the relationship goes so tragic at the end, because this is a movie about a guy. About a lot of people who like have, you can imagine like if like circumstances have been different for them, that like they could be good, decent people in the movie. I mean, I think it's really interesting actually that Nolte and Willem Dafoe were cast as brothers, and you know, Dafoe, it's like he talks about just like him being cautious his whole life is just sort of like kept him like on the straight and narrow throughout his whole life. And I think the casting of Dafoe is really interesting, because like you could almost imagine like Dafoe playing the Nolte character, and I think because both he and Nolte have like capacity for playing like very, they're able to like run the gamut of like, you know, monstrous and humane and like flawed but like sympathetic characters. Like they really do have like both similar emotional ranges, and it's like it is the case of like these actors' roles could be flipped, I imagine, and also these characters just themselves, they, if circumstances had been different, like it could have been different for them. Yeah, I agree that like, you know, the movie like does like capture like the cold New Hampshire town like really well. The way that like, you know, like the characters are just like, you know, trudging through the snow and everything, like having to move very slowly, and also like just like the little touches like Holmes Osborne when he arrives at like the crime scene, and he's putting like lip balm on so his lips don't get chapped. Like that's like so well handled, and like the wind and like the score is also really eerie too, like in terms of like it's what's his name, Michael Brooks, I think, who I looked up as a Canadian musician, and like the way like the tempo
Brook.
like
Singular.
Michael Brook. Drop the S. Just Brooke. It's cleaner. Yeah. But like I was just rewatching some of the scenes where like, you know, it's like this really like intense, furious tapping noise, and then other times it's like these, you know, kind of discordant strings, but also like that also does have like a gentle sort of quality to it. Yeah. No, I found this really painful because to watch though, because it is like a very humane movie and everything. It is, like I said, it's like where you can imagine these characters. I think this movie has a lot of empathy for its characters, even as it like sort of refuses to like, you know, pull its punches in terms of like where their actions take them. And yeah, no, this is definitely a territory that the Schraders explored before. I mean, like sort of like where characters like try to sort of like outrun their past and then like find that like that they're just like imprisoned by it. I mean, like that's what the card counter is. Like, even though very different circumstances and setting, it's like. Yeah, no, I really liked it though. I'm looking forward to talking more about it, especially hearing what everyone else thinks about it. Yeah.
I'm just going to quickly note that Dafoe did want to play Wade. I think he was told that it didn't quite fit, and he was ultimately happy with how it was done.
I think he's very good in the movie as the brother. Just
yeah,
like like the tense sort of like grimaces that he has whenever like he's just like witnessing his family members just like crashing and right before his eyes. Yeah, it's so good.
But I was just gonna say, I'm gonna go real quick. I didn't write down my initial thoughts or anything because I was I watched 16 Schrader movies in preparation for this. If you want to know how good my life has been, how much I just need to not think about things. But it's been incredible because before this I had only seen 2 of his directed movies, and that was First Reformed and Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist. But anyways, and for the most part, besides like, I don't know, maybe like 4 that I just like outright was just like, get him out of here. Like, pretty much all the rest I liked to love. Like, I'd never seen Blue Collar, loved Blue Collar. I'd never seen Card Counter, loved Card Counter. Never seen Hardcore, fucking love Hardcore. But yeah, it was like one of the best director deep dives that I've done for this podcast, so that was really awesome. And then Affliction was like my second to last one. I'm pretty sure I watched this, and then I watched The Comfort of Strangers, and then I took a big old nap after that. But it was...
That movie's good. I'm just going to throw that out there. That movie's demented, and I kind of love it.
Christopher Walken is making choices in the movie. I will give you that.
Oh, is he?
But yeah, so this is my second to the last one that I did for research, and I liked it. It's very similar to like Autofocus, and I think like there's like another movie that's kind of similar as far as the dynamics between like the husband and the wife and whatnot, where in Autofocus, obviously he's going off and doing some shit with my man John Carpenter, aka William Dafoe, and it's just like constantly not being home for your spouse and whatnot, and the husband's always out and stuff like that. It's very much like this in Affliction. That's where it starts out with Mary Beth Hurt. You know, they're already split up, and then he gets Sissy Spacek, and then she's eventually just like, all I'm doing is taking care of your fucking dad. I didn't sign up for this. And then eventually just leaves and takes his daughter and whatnot, which is really, really sad, but it's also just like, yeah, what do you expect? But yeah, I just like that. I'm pretty sure I watched Autofocus right before this, and I was like, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of similarities in how the marriages are set up, but I was very, I knew that Defoe narrated it, but I thought he would be in it a little bit more. He is fourth billed and doesn't show up until 50 minutes in, but he is also like a character that means so much to the story, even though he's on the sidelines the entire time. Like, he, of course, narrates it at the beginning and the end and just kind of wraps the entire movie up. But, yeah, I liked it. It made me want to rewatch A Simple Plan, not only as just research for Bill Paxton, but also it's just very similar milieu, murder in snowy towns and whatnot. And then I was just like, oh, fuck it, I'm depressed right now. I just rewatched Sweet Hereafter. Thankfully, I didn't do either of those. I watched True Lies instead. But enough about me. Michelle, initial thoughts on Affliction. I know that you have seen this before, and I know you love it, so please tell me about Affliction.
Yes, I do love it. I've loved it for a long time. I saw it when I was, I think, 14 or 15, and it's my favorite Schrader movie, favorite performance by my favorite actor, Nick Nolte. I think it represents one of the high points for Schrader's career, and sort of a bridge between his earlier God's Lonely Man figures of his scripts for Taxi Driver and Hardcore, American Gigolo, Light Sleeper, focusing on a reaction to nightlife, and later films like First Reformed and The Card Counter, which are much more openly about the effect of these institutions and the men who represent them, who can no longer withstand either the contradictions of the position or the emotional toll or the pain or the losses that they are at least somewhat responsible for and have meted out as these just figures of I don't know, masculine authority. I also think it's the apex of Nick Nolte's incredible run in the 90s, because he started out like playing these outsiders and frustrated or flawed heroes in movies like Who Will Stop the Rain and North Dallas 40 and Under Fire. And by the late 80s, early 90s, he moves into playing these tarnished masculine authority figures. He like cops and fathers and husbands and lovers of a different stripe, where instead of being someone who's desperately trying not to be boxed in, he's someone who he's these characters who have been boxed in and are reacting against it, and who have failed the people in their lives and are forced to reckon with their failure if they're going to have any continued relationship with the ones they love. I mean, I think it's interesting that the movies that got Nolte the awards attention were The Prince of Tides and Affliction, because one is very much about someone who has learned only harmful ways of how to react to pain, how to express pain, how to deal with just the awful things that happened in his life, and it's become destructive towards his family. And if he wants to be the father, the husband, the brother that he always was meant to be, he has to unlearn that. And if The Prince of Tides is about someone who is with great effort able to do that, Affliction is the opposite, of someone who desperately needs to break free of all the things that have kept him just in pain his whole life and trying very hard not to repeat everything his father was, but never quite finding anything else because he doesn't know anything else. Nolte writes in his, I think, pretty good autobiography, Rebel: My Life Outside the Lines, about how it's a movie about how men are taught not to love, how are taught not to love the people in their lives, how not to express love, and I think it for me it's one of the best movies about that. It's also a movie that has a lot just tied up with me personally because around the time when I watched it was a time when my dad was struggling with alcoholism. He's fortunately he's okay now, but it is a film that I've turned to time and time again, like as a kind of odd therapeutic device, to be honest, because it's a film that has actors able to go on just the edge of a person's life, at the edge of a person's emotions, where they are forced with a moment to determine whether they can become something other than what they've been pushed into being their whole life that doesn't fit them, that is a terrible fit for them, and the tragedy of someone who isn't able to do that and who ends up living up to all of the or living down to all of the terrible things that his father is. I love Coburn in this. I love Spacek in this as someone who really just loves this man and can't give up on him until it's clear that he's just too far gone or isn't going to turn back. I can wax rhapsodic about it for a while, but yeah, it's a movie I really love and have a very personal relationship with.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Charlie, last initial thoughts.
Yeah, I had seen this before. I'd only seen it once, but it has always been one of my favorite Schrader films. I think up until First Reformed, which, yeah, basic take, First Reformed is my favorite Schrader film. This was my top spot up until then, and I still think it's a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. And I remember the first time I watched it, just for very, superficial story. I remember I was struggling a little bit, and I was living at home with my parents for a period of time, and I planned to go to a basement show on a Saturday night, and I, for whatever reason, decided to watch this in the afternoon before I went to that basement show, and then after watching this, had to go out like an hour later, and all I wanted to do was stare at a wall for like several hours, because it really affected me. And to note about what everybody else is saying, I think it's an incredible and deeply empathetic, unflinching portrait of, yes, toxic masculinity, of alcoholism, of abuse being a cyclical thing that that is so hard to escape. And I think the film does a great job of portraying this in a way that, I mean, the first time I watched it, not knowing where it ends up, and I promise I won't get into spoilers just yet, but the first time I watched it, I knew it wasn't going to end well. The second time watching it this week, it was actually even more painful for me because of how I knew everything was going to end, and the breadcrumbs were so much more evident. Just even the opening scenes with him taking his daughter to this convention, and how uncomfortable his daughter was, and it actually just, it stung even more. And also, just coming from a personal place, I've always been closer with my mom's side of the family, and my dad's side of the family I've always been in touch with, but not nearly as much. And I know that my father's father wrestled with alcoholism a lot, and don't know specific details, but know that he and my grandmother were divorced when I was born, and there were some things that happened. And my grandmother, he's no longer with us, and neither is my grandmother, but I know that, and I loved them both dearly, but I could always sense that my mom was uncomfortable around him, and especially when he was drinking. And I know that I will never fully know, nor have I ever wanted to ask my dad what, It's clear that my dad had a very tumultuous childhood in ways that this film, without even knowing the details of that, like, hits close to me, even if it doesn't personally affect me in certain details that I know. I just can sense that intimacy of these characters wrestling with a very similar type of we don't want to confront our past demons type of thing that I worry about, that I personally, I know this is going to sound very schmaltzy, but sometimes I think about that in my own relationship with just, you know, my own family history in certain ways. Not even this film, it almost hits me on a subconscious level, because I can't say that I relate to this and that these characters and that I've lived through what they've lived through, but I know my family history has had it touches upon similar things with their own personal struggles, and I think that even if I didn't, that's not the point, but I do think that the film does such a good job of making you empathize with these characters in dealing with mental illness and masculinity in general. And I know I'm rambling here, but the other thing that I hadn't seen the first time I watched this, I had not seen the Nicholas Ray film In a Lonely Place, which I also think this film in many ways is directly inspired by, with oh Jesus Christ, with the with the Bogart character, and I see much of that relationship that he has with Gloria, why am I blanking? Gloria Graham. The whole Sissy Spacek relationship that he has with her. It's not the same thing, but I see a lot of the same type of relationship dynamics. And, you know, Schrader being a huge scholar of film, I'm sure took influence and inspiration from that. So sorry if that was a little rambly and nonsensical, but that's kind of where I come from on this. And that I'm also not going to lie. At one point, second time I watched this, I watched it after a shift at work, and I was a little sleepy, and I had seen the movie before, but I woke up during a very pivotal scene of this movie that involves fire, and I, in my half-conscious state, watched it, and it, like, even though I'd seen it before, it shook me up so much that I couldn't go back to sleep, and then I just rewound it and watched the entire last hour of the movie. Like, that, like, it really, this movie hits me hard for reasons I don't even fully cognitively understand, but it emotionally just destroys me. And I think it is one of Schrader's best films. I also kind of want to open up, I feel like it got a lot of great reputation at the time. If you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score and the Metacritic score and stuff like that, it's considered one of his most acclaimed works, but I feel like it's kind of dipped down since then, and I don't know if it's because people are, you know, find the content too tough, or if a critical consensus has changed since then, or because I don't think this film ages badly at all. In fact, I think we could use more films that are like this and this nuance when it comes to portraits of internally damaged men. And I can't think of many films that are released now that handle it this sensitively and unflinchingly and put their own feet to the fire, but also have an aching sense of sympathy for the as all of you have mentioned, the situation they were born into, you know, in the families that they were born into with, you know, yeah. I'll just leave that out for yeah.
That's all great. I want to say it's really interesting. You mentioned the fire scene, and we won't get into like exactly the specifics of that. But I keep bringing up this Nick Nolte documentary I watched. It's funny hearing. I think Schrader originally wanted to like just shoot the fire and not Nolte's reaction to it, and Nolte like apparently got like really mad about like how his reaction wasn't gonna be in it, so he stomped off, and then he realized like he couldn't go anywhere because he was like deep in the snow, so he like came back, and then like I think eventually Schrader was like, all right, fine, we can like figure it out so that, like we can have you in the shot, and then like Nolte refused to look at the fire and like in the shot, and like that works so well in the movie and everything, but it's funny to hear like just him being so stubborn about it, and I just thought that was an interesting bit of trivia that he gave in the documentary. Anyways, yeah. But yeah, no, we talked about it, I think before we started recording, because I think, Michelle, you had some theories as to why maybe this movie doesn't have quite as big a reputation as just as Charlie was talking about. I don't know if maybe we want to get into that, but I find it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I have some guesses. I think some of Schrader's, I think who was it who said that this is maybe the straightest Schrader film?
It was me.
Yeah, like yeah. I wonder how much of it is that it is, you know, it's drawing heavily. I haven't read the Banks novel, but I like how much it's drawing specifically from that and from the atmosphere of that, and that there is a little less room for some of the other things that Schrader likes to play with sometimes, but it's also very much a film about how these rigid masculine roles are absolutely poisonous for these people. So it's still at least somewhat playing in the same territory for me. The other thing that I wonder is that I know some people think the Coburn performance is too much.
Yeah,
I think it works.
I think it works really well.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know. Like, I've seen at least some people complain about the Coburn performance being a caricature of a drunk. I have never felt that. I think it comes off as this man who, well, we don't know that much about his backstory, at least not in the film, but he seems like someone who came, like, whether he went to war or something else, who like lived in a truly painful time and never knew anything else. I mean, he talks about his own father in the movie as like someone who was a real man, someone he took after and tried to be like, and he's just someone who I don't think ever had a model for kindness at all. And as we see him in his old age, he's frequently, like, there are moments of him about him that are very, very sad, but it's not the kind of thing where you truly feel like you'd like to put your hand on his shoulder. He's mostly a pitiable figure, because he's someone, even in his grief, who thinks mostly about himself and how it's going to affect him. And it's all about people he treated horrendously his whole life. And it's I just wonder if people find how quickly he snaps, how much the character just launches into like this high-pitched mocking voice to really dig at Nolte and at his other children and at the other people around him. If some people think that's too much, I personally think he's superb. But
do you think it also could be because he won the Oscar and now there's that whole retrospective? Because if he didn't win the Oscar, would people be having this conversation if it was just like, well, Billy Bob Thornton in Simple Plan was right there. I mean, come on, like,
I do prefer that performance, but it's more there could be more than one good performance.
I think they're the two best in that lineup, but I probably would go with Coburn myself. I have much more to complain about the Best Actor winner that year.
Benigni, and I've never seen Life is Beautiful,
he
but
stood on a chair after he won. That's charming. Okay, I haven't seen it either.
One thing I wanted to ask, just because we talked a little bit about Nolte and like his whole persona, and his career too. Kevin, you were saying that, like, and I don't see this like as like a like with a bone to pick, but like I thought it was interesting. You said you viewed
my ass.
No, you said you viewed Coburn's Oscar win as like that was maybe a lifetime achievement win, possibly. And I'm curious, maybe because I don't know enough about Coburn as a person or about his career. I feel like I've only seen like a smattering of movies, but like, if it wasn't for this movie, what would the other, like, what was it a makeup for that I guess maybe he got the Oscar for? I don't know if there are theories or like if maybe other movies that are worthwhile.
If he wouldn't have won it for this, he would have got it for Snow Dogs, and that's pretty much written in the stars. I said that just as a general, like, old-timey actor comes out of retirement. He is great in it, but once you told me that Billy Bob was also nominated, I was like, fuck James Coburn. Which is wrong. He's great. He's great.
Wasn't that bad.
I did watch his Oscar win on YouTube, which everyone can watch it. But what did kind of break my heart was I looked at his wiki and saw that his final dedication when he won his Oscar was to his then wife Paula Coburn, and you look at that and he died of a heart attack in her arms, and then she died of cancer 2 years later, which is
and she was only in her like 40s or 50s at the time. She was younger than he was, so it's heartbreaking. I have a feeling that Coburn, like, he was an actor that people appreciated, but he was so frequently in movies that did not get awards attention, like things like Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, or Hustle, or what's the Walter Hill one, Hard Times, or The President's Analyst, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's also like, I mean, you could argue, and this is just a hypothetical because no one is arguing that in this conversation right now that he didn't deserve it, but I mean, imagine you see the film set from Nick Nolte's daughter's perspective, and then it's just, you know, like, oh, this character's too much, you know, like, based on the only interactions you see her with in interacting with him. I think that the film does a good job of not justifying any of the behavior as correct. But, you know, and the other thing, I think, I was talking to somebody at work who was complaining about, they liked the movie, but they didn't like the aesthetic, the graininess of the flashbacks, which I thought was also interesting this time around. And I picked up on the fact that, I think it's not just an aesthetic that's used for aesthetic purposes. I think it's meant to be specifically in Nolte's head. Because, and we don't know if they're entirely reliable, because at one point Defoe even says, no, I don't think I was there. Like, you know, like, it's all memory, and memory is in some ways unreliable. The emotional impact of it is not, but what you see is coming from his perspective, and he's the one starting to unravel. So
I mean,
1000%.
the haziness of it, I think, is very intentional, where like there are like key things in that experience of trauma that he'll never forget, but the details of who was there and who he was protecting or what he was doing exactly get lost, because I'm sure so much of these incidents end up blending together, where like he probably does remember a lot of incidents of him trying to stand up for his brother and failing, like him getting punched in the face probably was not an irregular occurrence, because Wolf, I think is the character's name, the Defoe character.
Yes.
Like he says, like he was very careful around his dad after that, and like Wade was the one who, because he was the oldest son, the one that was the most frequent target, and the most frequent like, I'm gonna make something out of you. He's the one who's had to bear all of it, and so much of the narration, I also think it's not just like a device. It's this character who talks about how much he loves his brother, but also talks about how he's completely detached from all of it. He's only really talking about it historically with a little bit, like he blames himself at one point in the narration, because like really all he's ever been able to do to survive is detach from everything he was. And Wade talked about how he was, someone who messed around when he was a kid, but he stuck around. He was the good son. He was the one who is still with his father, is still helping him, even though he fucking hates him. And he became the town cop to make something of himself, and it's brought him nothing but ruin.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, the difference like between like Rolf, like he went to BU, he talks about and everything. It's like, whereas maybe Nolte's character didn't have like, whether it's the financial wherewithal or like the academic skills, which like that's not like a flaw or anything, but just like maybe like the opportunity, not necessarily the same opportunities afforded to him to get out. I also think it's totally key that like the Defoe character is like, talking about like he's a student of history and like is like an academic, like in the sense that he's a teacher and everything, viewing this, like you said, from like a remove, and those flashbacks too. I mean, I think it's also what breaks my heart too is like how they blend into like the present, even like just like the similar shot setups, like that whole like it's the close up of like the punch and like the angry faces and everything in the flashback, and then like when there's the funeral argument when Coburn like threatens Sissy's face again, like Nolte like shoves him up against the wall and says like, I will kill you if you ever do this again, and then like it even cuts to like a similar, both like the flashback and that funeral fight end on shots of Defoe just looking kind of helpless and everything, and it's like it's so heartbreaking like how just like these things keep repeating. And again, like the movie just like has this note of dread like throughout from like the beginning with the voiceover where it's like, well, this is how everything went wrong for my brother. It's like to even in like I said, even in happy moments, you're just like there is like a sense that like everything's going to go wrong in this movie, and it's so despairing. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that stands out about that flashback isn't just how Rolf doesn't remember it that way and is being able to look at it detached, but it's introduced as this drunk telling the story at the diner like it's a fucking funny story. And like, have you ever like had that sort of experience where there's this traumatic thing that happened to you or to someone you knew or someone who you loved, and you overhear someone retelling it as like a goof, as this anecdote about, God, this guy was so mean, and it sure was funny, and like it's not funny for the person who who grew up in it and now has to play off like it was nothing in order to save face and not show any sort of weakness.
Yes, I think of like it's sometimes I've been like the one like where if I've like heard about things secondhand or just sort of been on the fringes of things, I'll like with my own family, like it's not anything like to the degree of this movie or anything, but it'll be like, oh, like I heard this like thing that was kind of funny, and then like someone will say like, yeah, like that's like I know what you mean, like you're not in the wrong, but like that's like that there's like that's too painful for me to think about and everything. I'm like, oh, okay, like so I'm more considerate about that.
Tragedy plus time equals comedy. Well, maybe to you coping with it, but not always to the person on the receiving end. Yeah, like it won't ring true in any way, and it could be, a complete projection or defense mechanism. I also couldn't help but think about how the one time Dafoe does get directly involved again, he makes a mistake. Like, he makes an utter mistake, and that's the one time he decided to be like fully engaged again. And I think that's a really fascinating thing as a narrator to be like, also, I'm the one telling the story and I am not responsible for anyone's actions, but I did plant this seed and I hate myself for that. I know I'm not the one responsible, but I do feel culpable in some way. And also just you mentioning the scene at the funeral where if you ever do this again, I'm gonna fucking kill you. I completely forgot about this small moment where Nick Nolte is not there, where Sissy Spacek is just doing dishes, and Nick Nolte or James Coburn basically like assaults her.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
And he's not in the picture, and it's just showing like it's such a small moment that seemingly I bet it went like it didn't even affect most people back in the day, or like, but it is so telling of like just the way this character. And he even, I mean, the other thing is that's a subtle scene, but the ways in which Coburn talks about women in general is not subtle at all. I mean, especially towards the end. The other thing I was thinking of, and I know we're probably going to get into the plot, is at one point, Nick Nolte's mom and her passing come into the plot, and I genuinely don't, and the movie makes it, I think this is actually a really great ambiguous choice of, we don't know how long this character has passed, if it's Coburn being like, oh shit, they're here, I have to pretend that this thing happened, or like, we don't know if it is just she died of medical term I'm looking for. Hypothermia, excuse me. Yeah, exactly. We don't know if it was that or something else, and the movie makes it. And what's interesting is that Nolte, all the characters just accept it as that, but the film addresses it to us as if it could be something more else. And yeah.
See, I took that as, I didn't see any doubt as to whether it was hypothermia, but the thing is that it's still Coburn's fault. Like, he was the one who let the thing open, and Nolte says almost with defeat, with resignation, like, didn't you know it? I can't remember exactly what the question of me was, but like, it's clear that this is something that he knows has been, coming for a long time, that his father would be responsible for his mother's death. And it's just, instead of a brutal and violent death, it's this just sad kind of negligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Coburn plays that moment too when they first like meet him in the present and everything. Like, he looks almost embarrassed to have been found in the state, and then not long after he starts drinking again, and like or starts drinking in front of them, and like that's sort of like his way to cope with it, I guess. The moment with SpaceX, I mean, what's with regard to Coburn like going big, I think what's really scary about his performance, and also feels very accurate to that character, is how casually he plays this behavior and everything. Like, the way that like when he's chuckling so grimly and everything, like after like he's like slapped his son, or punched his son rather, or like after he's like groped Sissy Spacek and everything, he's like, well, he's just like roughhousing these people and everything. Like, that's how he views just treating people. He doesn't really view them like for how they will react to it. I find like that sort of flippancy that he brings to these interactions like so upsetting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he's this character who, like, he doesn't have the power he once had because he's old and much frailer than he once was. And this is also Coburn, who was a pretty like tough guy actor, and this is years after. I know he had been acting in a couple of things. He had had to step away for a while because of rheumatoid arthritis, and then I think in the 90s he became a little more active. But like, this is one of his first big roles back, and he is a much frailer actor, but he still has quite a bit of power and just is someone who is used to carrying his weight around. So even though he's diminished, he's able to not like there's something a little pathetic about it, but also very real about how much he is able to intimidate Nolte. Like I love how much Nolte plays the interactions with him as someone who's just trying not to engage so many times, just trying not to feed his anger until he just can't take it anymore. And it's usually either when Coburn has snapped at him too many times, or when Coburn has treated Spacek terribly, and that's when he launches into what he wants to be protective, but is just the same anger, the same rage, the same kind of fury that is going to push everyone away from him because he cannot walk away.
Yeah, Nolte's physicality in those scenes is just incredible. Like the hunched shoulders, the way he just is looking at the floor, yes. Like you said, not wanting to engage. It's such a locked in performance. It's incredible. Yeah, just the way he walks, like he's just like a man who is so burdened with everything that he's been through.
And then you contrast that with when he's with his daughter, where like the love is very real. Like he does believe that, but he doesn't know how to show it. And you see someone trying so hard not to be his father, and then whenever there's a slight, he can't help himself. Well, like he can't be the bigger person because, well, I mean, there are a whole host of reasons why he might not be able to, but he still is lashing out like that child who's been wronged, like someone who has been, kicked his whole life, and he's now in a position of power and a position of authority, and someone who has to raise a child, and he's just woefully unequipped for the softness that she really needs, and just cannot bring him, like his attempts to apologize are terrible and come after like enormous effort. When things are really bad, he does this just fake jovial thing where he's trying so hard to make her laugh, and she is just miserable. And this is even before he lashes out in the diner and tries to be like, oh, no, nothing happened. Like he knows how badly he is, like in one moment or another, like how badly he is going to affect his daughter, but he can't bring himself out of feeling like he always was, and adjusting to be the man he needs to be. He can't bring himself to it.
Even the scene at the beginning, the second time around, where it's mostly alcohol, obviously, but like his daughter says, I want to go home, I called mom, and he's like, what do you mean you called mom? And then he immediately tries to be like, hey, put that wacky tobacco away, and then you're just like, oh, come on, chill, like come have marijuana with us. He's like, well, my daughter is getting picked up by my ex-wife, so yeah, let's go for a ride. And then the mom's just like, what the fuck, what are you doing in this car? Like, like even that is like a form of escape of him trying to just I found that to be interesting this time around, of like, because obviously marijuana does not produce the same types of side effects that alcohol does in mass consumption. But I did find that to be interesting, of he just immediately finds another substance to zone himself out from his own failures and abandons his daughter in a public setting. Like,
because so much of his behavior has just become compulsive, and he cannot, like he tries to be different from his father and just cannot break those compulsions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also like no one respects him as a lawman. Like he says, like, hey, like move your car, and people are like, fuck you, no. Like it's like no one takes him seriously. It's
that scene where he goes to give the guy a ticket, and he's just like, go fuck yourself. He's just like, he's like tapping the ticket on the door, and he's just like, oh, okay. And it's so weird how he's like, I mean, he is a very small town policeman, but it's like, when you think of policemen in movies, he's not like pulling people over and stuff like that. It's just like, yeah, I guess I gotta go plow the snow and whatnot. It's just like, and then it's like, I'm just gonna hang out at the police station, I guess, or I'm gonna smoke in front of my boss, who does not like it whatsoever.
He has so little power or respect, and that all feeds into just this mania of they're all going to change. I've been here forever. I'm going to, like, they're gonna see how much they need me, and it's all one thing for him.
I was just going to say also, I think in terms of physical performances, I mean, it's obviously not the same type of physicality that Coburn and Nolte have, but I do like that anytime, like, Sissy Spacek is so good and subtle in this film in that every time that she's off screen, you know that she's having all these thoughts and feelings that are racing through her head, but every time you get back to her, she doesn't need a big I'm feeling this way speech. Like, you know, you can tell that she's getting fed up and exhausted and scared, and then by the time that her climactic scene arrives, she doesn't need a big speech and saying I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It's literally, I mean, that also broke my heart as at one point where Nick Nolte tries to embrace her and she just breaks down and says, "Get away from me." And it just tells you everything you need to know without any sense of histrionics at all, because the script and respects Spacek's character, and Spacek is such a good enough character to just allow you to be like, she's done. She's, you know, she has boundaries. They've been crossed multiple times. I need to get out of here. And it's also in a great way that she doesn't fully see how you know, how far down Nolte has, you know, fallen until Coburn comes into the picture, and then she's able to piece together everything that's coming, you know, head on. So, yeah. That
moment is also like the dam breaking for his kid too. Who the actor playing the kid is so good. Bridget Tierney is her name. Just like the contempt with her inner voice as she's like sort of like saying like, that's illegal. You shouldn't be drinking while driving and everything. Like it's like it is like it's like like the voice is just like so perfect, and then like that's just like the straw that breaks the camel's back in that moment. That Spacek scene. Yeah, it's so good.
I can just run through the plot like real quick.
Go for it.
4x speed, Kev Bones. Let's go. Rolf Whitehouse begins the film announcing the story of his brother's Wade's, quote, strange criminal behavior and subsequent disappearance. Wade Whitehouse is a small-town policeman in New Hampshire. On Halloween night, Wade meets his daughter Jill, but he is late and the evening is overshadowed by disharmony. Jill eventually calls her mother, Wade's ex-wife, to come and pick her up. When his ex-wife finally arrives, Wade shoves her lover against the car and watches them drive away with Jill. I love how his apology is like, I didn't punch him. Like, that's good enough.
Yeah. Also great in that scene too is when like he tries to have power over his kid and says like, well, you'll just have to wait here, I guess, by yourself for your mom. And then she's like, fine, I will wait. And then you see in Nolte's face fall, like it's just like, that's not what I wanted. Like I want like it's like him realizing that she doesn't want him around is like what breaks his heart in that moment. Yeah. It's so good.
That first scene is very, very interesting because like when I'm watching it, of course I don't know where this is gonna go, and I can definitely tell he's just trying so hard to get with her, to get on her level, to engage with her and whatnot. And it's just pretty much, as far as I remember, the first thing she says is just like, yeah, I want to leave. And you're just like, you feel so bad because maybe, you know, you don't know necessarily if he's done anything bad or if she's just like homesick or whatnot. And then you eventually learn she's like, no, she's smart and just no, she should not be around him.
Yeah, I mean, she says, I love you, I do, really. And I think she means it, but she also just knows he is like, he's not good for her. And you know, it's, you know, three different women in the movie at different points of realization that you know, between the ex-wife and Sissy Spacek and her are just at different points of realizing that he is not good for them, that he just is not going to change.
Yeah. Where was I at? Wade vows to get a lawyer to help gain custody of his daughter. Probably a bad idea. The next day, Wade rushes to the scene of a crime. Jack, a local hunting guide, claims that Evan, with whom he was hunting, accidentally shot and killed himself. The police believe Jack, but Wade grows suspicious, believing that the man's death was no accident. When he's informed that the victim was scheduled to testify in a lawsuit, his suspicion slowly turns into conviction. A while later, Wade and his girlfriend, Margie, played by Sissy Spacek, arrive at the house of Wade's alcoholic father, Glenn, whose abusive treatment of Wade and Ralph as children is seen in flashbacks throughout the film. Wade finds his mother lying dead in a bed from hypothermia. Glenn reacts to her death with little surprise and later gets drunk at her wake and gets into a fight with Wade. Rolf, who has come home for the funeral, suggests at first that Wade's murder theory could be correct, but later renounces himself of this presumption. Nevertheless, Wade becomes obsessed with this conviction. When Wade learns that the town selectman Gordon is buying up property all over town with the help from a wealthy land developer, he makes the solving of these incidents his personal mission, probably to cover up the fact that his life is crumbling all around me. But who's to say?
Quick question. The person that is helping Gordon, the Holmes Osborne character, buy up the land, isn't it like the son-in-law of the guy who got shot? I can't remember quite the connection of all. I just just figured I'd ask.
I think he was the father-in-law.
Maybe I think because I think it's the guy who nearly runs Nolte down at the school crossing, and then like Nolte says like, oh, like that's
the son-in-law.
There's like some that's the son-in-law, right? And then okay, maybe I was just confused, but yeah, it's a small town, which everyone kind of knows each other.
Which even that moment is such a red flag where it's because he's dissociating at one point. Like he is completely dissociating, and instead of coping with that, he's taking it out on everybody. This person probably shouldn't have driven by him like that, but at the same time not taking no culpability for his actions, which is, again, seeing this, I've only seen this twice. Everything hurts so much more this time around, just knowing everything. The
physicality too, like talking about like how Nolte moves throughout the movie. What's also scary about those moments is like how still his face is and everything. You just like lost in like the reverie of that pain. It's
This scene I really love. He follows Jack, convinced that Jack is running away from something that is involved in a conspiracy. After a car chase, a nervous Jack finally pulls over and threatens Wade with a rifle, shooting out his tires and drives off. I love how he just sits there and is just like, yeah, I guess I deserve that, after just shooting out his fucking tires and leaving. Finally, Wade is fired for harassing Jack and trashing his boss's office. He collects Jill from her mother's house, where his ex-wife furiously castigates him over his plans to sue for full custody. At a local restaurant, he attacks the bartender in front of his daughter. Then Wade takes Jill home to find Margie leaving him. Wade grabs Margie and begs her to stay, but Jill rushes up and tries to stop the fight. In response, Wade angrily pushes Jill, giving her a bloody nose, forcing both her and Margie to drive off. Wade is then approached by Glenn, who congratulates him for finally acting like a quote-unquote real man. The latent aggression between the men culminates in another fight in which Wade accidentally kills his father. He burns the corpse in the barn, sits down at the kitchen table, and starts drinking. That is a incredible shot, so I'm glad that Nolte did not look over the fire. I just love how it's just in the background. It's great stuff.
And then the truck catches on fire too.
We mentioned it is before we started recording. It was the rare Paul Schrader ending that is not a reference to pickpocket, but to something else. The sacrifice in this case.
Yeah, it's a rare, not pickpocket, and not. Most of his movies are not really hopeful, but they're just like, well, it's not entirely fucked. Like Taxi Driver, it's not exactly hopeful, and wherever your allegiance lies to, if you think he's doing the right thing or not, it's still.
And also if it's real too.
Yeah. Oh yes, yeah. And if it's real, or if it's basically just like this cycle is going to keep continuing and whatnot. That's not as disparaging as just like burning your father and everything that happens after this. And then he disappeared
and probably died.
And also murdered Jack, the Ginger Frost character. Like, it's like he killed him afterwards and then like went off on the run to Canada. The other thing too, I mean, you're right, Kevin, but like there is like occasionally the sliver of optimism in Paul Schrader's movie. I mean, like Light Sleeper, one of the last lines is like, I've been looking forward. And it's like, and this is like the inverse of that. It's like this guy cannot stop looking back, and like he can't get over what happened to him. Also, Nolte, when he finds out that he's killed Coburn, like he plays it so interestingly where he doesn't like break down. He almost looks relieved, as if like this is like kind of, or I don't know if I maybe misread it and everything, but like the way that his face just sort of relaxes. I don't know if that's him maybe just like completely snapping. Like it's just like inside his mind, his brain's just sort of broken. But like it is like almost like a weight has like been lifted in some way, even though that doesn't like stop him from going down that path like that he goes down. It's just, I don't know. I thought it was a really interesting reaction. Like he doesn't go like the expected route.
I mean, it's not a complete breakdown, but I also, how much of it is relief? How much of it is realizing that he became, like really not very different from his father? How much of it is the realization that he doesn't really have anything left and he can just leave these people behind, but that leaves a child without a father, a huge hole in the lives of a lot of people who did care about him and it just became too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's also, I couldn't help but think about, and maybe this is why the scene just sticks with me. I mean, it sticks with me for a multitude of reasons. I can't even, I think both of you are correct in certain ways in that I think Nolte's performance is so good in these moments that I don't even fully understand or can completely cognitively articulate what he's feeling, but I feel it on so many levels of like, and I don't even know what I'm feeling myself, and like just the immediate response to set him on fire. The thing is, and this goes for a lot of Paul Schrader films, is that especially Raging Bull, but like, Taxi Driver is known for its violence being very, very graphic. What I find to be really interesting is this is a movie where it could be very violently graphic, but even the tooth ripping scene, it's all very intimate and emotional, as opposed to being very bloody. Even when he shoots the guy at the end, it could have been more of a blood splatter or something like that. And I really think that the only graphically violent scene is just that shot of his father on fire, which fucking haunts me. Like, and just it's not a subtle metaphor for or anything. I don't give a shit. I don't think any of us give a shit about lack of how blunt it is. It's just that those shots and that score. Brian, you mentioned the score before. There's just like those two beats that keep repeating every few seconds, and just Nolte just sadly and pathetically just trudging through the snow in that long pan over, and then it cuts over to the internal shot of his house where it's just I really can't fully articulate just all the feelings that gives me, but that was also like, I'd seen the movie before and I woke up and during that scene falling asleep, and I was just like, this is like shaking me up. Like, and I missed the context of everything, and then I had to go back and rewatch the whole thing because it just and Michelle, I mean, it sounds like it hits you in a very personal place too, and I also want to say thank you for being very open and honest and vulnerable about that too, because I know that must not be easy at all. So, and I didn't want to overshadow it with my own stuff either.
No,
so
I'm glad you felt like you could share.
Yeah, and you too. So just didn't want to overshadow that in any way. Just I know it's been a few dozen minutes since we've talked about it, but just didn't want to overshadow.
No, that's okay. I wanted to read something very, very briefly. So this was tweeted out in February of 2021. To celebrate the great Nick Nolte's birthday, watch Affliction, to my eyes his finest accomplishment, Exhibit A, in the quality that sets him apart from even the best of his male peers, the willingness to cut himself wide open, the fearless revealing of emotional extremity. That was written by my friend Jim Gabriel. Flip Your Face on Twitter, who passed last month. Jim was the Nolte scholar I knew, someone I talked about with him all the time. He talked all about how Nolte's willingness to play human weakness, to play someone who is suffering and doesn't know how to express emotion and vulnerability. And I just wanted to mention Jim as someone I really appreciated talking about, one of my favorite actors with, especially someone who was truly gentle and special. And I just wanted to say something.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that.
We haven't had an uplifting movie like this since Requiem for a Dream. Is that about right?
Gosh, Kevin.
I could give you a slightly lighter note as well. I talked about Nolte's autobiography. If you haven't read it, let me recommend it. The very first line is, "Let me tell you about my testicle tuck."
What?
He talks about that, his testicles, in the documentary as well.
Oh, yes. Wonderful.
Yeah, and also funny that Powers Booth is in that, and we're talking about Powers Booth probably in a few minutes in Frailty and everything. Powers Booth talks about how he would go drinking at the end of a shooting day with Nolte, and I'd be pissed when Nolte would show up and have composure and everything. And Booth would be like, "How does he do it? I don't get it."
How does he do it? I don't get it. The Nick Nolte story. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at KevBonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at JDoyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CTNash91. Once again, thank you for listening.